everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I think many people will know who you are, but I'm going to give you an official introduction. This is spoken word artist, rapper, and a phrase he absolutely hates, so I'm going to use it. Social media sensation. Tell us why you hate that phrase.
I don't even know what it means.
You're a sensation on social media.
I don't know. I don't do anything sensational on social media. I get it. I have a large following, and then I guess that's what they consider sensational. But even then, we're talking about it like in the circles I roll with, I don't have a large following. But I get it.
Yeah.
In Canada, it's pretty big for your average Canadian. I think out here as well. And
the word influencer is used a lot as well.
Yeah, people are considered influencers because they're popular, but it doesn't really mean they're influential at all.
We'll talk more about that, but obviously Humble has two really brilliant books out, Things No One Else Can Teach Us and 101 Simple Truths for a Better Life, which we're going to talk about. But first of all, I want to start off by, just going back to 2010, because that's when you were a teacher, right? You were an elementary school teacher and
Yes.
You quit.
Yes.
Tell us what spurred that decision.
So I didn't technically quit and pursue art and pull the trigger. What ended up happening was I was making music. I started making music in about 2008. And by 2009, I was taking it a little bit more serious. And by serious, I mean I bought humblethepoet.com. And I started releasing music, and I was gaining traction because I was starting from zero, and there really wasn't anybody in the Desi community doing much in the space of hip hop, and YouTube was still brand new, and I had no idea how to put out my music otherwise, so I put it out on YouTube, and I was gaining a followership, and I was probably one of 4 Desis in Toronto using YouTube. I guess you probably named the rest of them. And I was working as a teacher, and I told myself that I wasn't going to pursue art full time because ain't no artist looking like me, and also every artist I knew in the downtown city, whenever I went to spoken word poetry events or whatever, they were all broke and struggling, and I'm like, that
seemed appealing.
Yeah, that sucks. I have a salary, and I went to school, and my parents would kick my ass if I try to leave any of this. So I was content working, and at the same time just creating art and doing it on the side, and it was getting me enough attention and breaking the ice and an excuse to talk to girls, and it was a nice, simple life, and I was happy. And then what happened was in the summer of 2010, I went to San Francisco, and I started staying with another rapper, and he was a full-time artist, and he was paying his rent with his music and his bills and everything. And it was kind of like being a zoo animal and getting to visit the jungle for a day and seeing a wild animal and how they exist, and you're immediately all I saw was freedom. I was like, this guy gets to wake up whenever he wants, go to sleep whenever he wants. He's a free individual. He's not trapped in the world of 9 to 5, because back then I thought that was the most evil thing in the world. And then, he showed me. He woke up every morning, went outside, the BART station, which is their equivalent to the Tube, and he would rap and put a hat down there, and people would give him money. He'd go to concerts, he'd negotiate with different artists to be like, hey, give me $50, I'll open for you. I just saw all the many different ways he was making money, and he would just make enough money to pay his rent, and then he'd make more money and have fun, and that was his life. And I think I really appreciated the freedom from that, and then when the summer ended, and I was just staying there as kind of as a guest, and I had money coming in from my teaching job. And then when September came around, I couldn't get back into it. And at the same time, I had just gone through a breakup, so I was super sad about that. I was struggling a little bit financially. I was a young guy working but living at home, so I was playing with my money, and I was playing in stocks and doing all that dumb stuff. And as 2008 had hit, and that really, as many of people, if you guys done anything financial in 2008, just kind of wiped everything away. So my salary, a lot of it was just paying the minimum payments on all this money I owed. And somebody came up to me, a producer I was working with, and he's like, hey, I can get us a deal. And this deal will be worth $120,000, and it'll wipe all your debt away, and you can be an artist. And it was just this all sounded too good to be true, but I was I had my blinders on. I wanted it, so I left my job to pursue it.
No regrets?
Huh? Well, the story continues. Spoiler alert, there was no deal. There was no money. That guy disappeared. But it took me a year of denial to realize this. So all I really did was I spent 2011 living off credit cards, line of credit, borrowed money, digging myself in a deeper hole. So by the time I realized that thinking any moment this check was coming, any moment this check was coming, because I had paperwork. And then at the same time, Humble the Poet was growing because I was doing it full time now, so my output was increasing. And so I was getting small gigs, not enough to pay the bills, but I was getting gigs. I got to in 2012, that's a year later, but I got to perform in India, I got to perform in the States. I was flying around doing stuff, not making a lot, but still staying busy, and enough to keep me distracted from what was not showing up in the mail. So it was December 2011 when I realized, like, this guy disappeared, no money is coming, I'm screwed. I have a mortgage payment, I was living on my own back then. I have massive, $80,000 in debt. And we tried to convert this yesterday. What is that?
Oh,
60 grand? I don't know.
Something along those
60,000
lines. A lot of money.
Pounds?
Yeah.
Whatever, yeah, I don't know the conversion, but. And then, so now that's the point where I instantly regret it. Like, you idiot, you had a government job, you were safe, it was respectable, it was 8 minutes from your house in a snowstorm. Like,
what did your parents think, by the way, at this stage?
So when I left, they were mildly okay with it, because I was teaching all day, and then I would tutor high school kids for extra money for about 4 hours in the evening, and then I'd come home and work on my music. So it wasn't like I was neglecting any adult responsibilities and just making music. The only thing I was neglecting was sleep. So they kind of recognized that, and during the holidays, all I was doing was making music. So they saw that I had a work ethic, and they also understood that I wasn't going to listen to them. I'm a Punjabi boy. We don't have to listen to our parents. My dad's mentality, the patriarchy. My dad's like, my 2 daughters are married. I don't really care what this guy does, right? So from that perspective, he was just like, if you're going to do it, go ahead and do it. My mom obviously was never, my mom's still not okay with it. Like, even after this point, she's still not okay with it. And
you need to go back to teaching or just get a proper job.
Well, every time good things started happening to Humble the Poet, she would just be like, but did you get paid? Did you get paid? You know, I'd be like, look, Mom, they put my name on like the cover of Rolling Stones. Did they pay you for that? And I was like, no, they did not pay me to put my name on a magazine. Or I got to perform at I performed at Nahal from the UK, took me out to Chicago to be his hype man when he performed at Lollapalooza. And he invited me and got me on stage, but I still had to buy my own ticket, I had to pay for my own hotel. All he was able to give me was the wristband to get on stage. And it was the same thing. Well, you know, did you get paid? I was like, no, I actually had to pay myself. And, you know, that's where she was at. And fast forward, many, many, many years later, when I started getting paid, instantly, I remember I took a check. It was a really big check. And I was like, look, Mom, look at this check. Instantly, she looked at it, she goes, you know money isn't everything. Instantly. And you realize you can't make them happy. So, you know, my policy is you can't make them happy, so don't try. So they were, and we were talking about this earlier, immigrant parents' version of being supportive is just staying out of your way, which is what they did, to the best of their ability. I got comments, I got whispers, but nobody tried to lock me up. No honor killings, no nothing like that was happening. They were just giving me space. So yeah, so pretty much I didn't pull the trigger and leave this job. I thought I had a better opportunity. Turns out I didn't have a better opportunity. What I like to say is that person who lied to me and betrayed me, even I'm over it. I forgive them. Things worked out very well. What they did was I didn't ever have the spine or the guts to take the leap. And what this person did was they pushed me off the cliff. And
so in hindsight, it was a good thing?
In hindsight, it was, I had to find my wings as I was crashing down before I hit the ground. What it was is that was the real start of Humble the Poet. So when I was at my lowest, when I was in debt, I had no money, I had no sources of income, I was super embarrassed. I started developing a relationship with different substances to like take away from the pain. I was avoiding my family. I lost 25 pounds, and as you can see, there's no 25 pounds to lose. I was just bones and beard, and I was avoiding the world, and I would stay in bed, and I just literally would drink NyQuil, which is night nurse for the UK folks, and I would drink it during the day and night, and just hope when I came back to consciousness, somebody would have fixed this for me. And that was my policy for 3 weeks. And then after 3 weeks, I think I probably got over a little of it, and then things changed, and I woke up and I was like, you got to start taking responsibility for your life.
And then you started writing, and the first book was actually self-published, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about that, because it's a very personal book. It's kind of you just, talking about your experiences, and how easy was it to write all of that? And you do actually also say that writing is not as glamorous as people think, if they think it is glamorous, but it wasn't what you had thought.
Writing isn't as glamorous as I thought it was. I don't know if anybody else thinks writing is glamorous, but I thought it was very glamorous. Like, I thought my first book was going to be written with a typewriter, like, by a lake.
Near a lake.
Yeah, literally, near a lake with a typewriter, like, And I just, even when you think about, like, Lord of the Rings was like typed in a typewriter. You're like, that's nuts. Like, that's bananas. I don't know how he does it. But what happened with me was, and it's exactly where the story picks up. I was in a situation where I did not know how to earn any money, and I was trying to create more music. I was like, I don't know, what do artists do? They make music and get discovered. That's the business model. Puff Daddy's gonna find me and throw money at me, and I'll be great. But I couldn't make music because now I was full time. The one guy I was making music with disappeared because he was a crook, and the other people I was making music with, they were all had full-time jobs, were married, they all had other responsibilities, and I wanted stuff done very quickly. And this is the same time I developed a friendship with Lily when I first met her. And she said to me, figure out what you can do by yourself. And if you guys know her story, she set up a tripod, put a camera, press record, did her thing.
Sure, people know, but this is Lily Singh.
Lily Singh,
yeah,
AKA Superwoman. And she would do it all by herself. There was no team. There was nobody else there. And that way, she's like, I only have to depend on myself. I don't have to wait on anybody for anything. Because it's frustrating. And I'm sure in part of some of your jobs, waiting on people just sucks. Collaborating with people sucks. When you're in school, doing group projects sucks. Because people suck, right? So
you do actually say that in one of your chapters, essentially. People are expensive.
People are expensive. People are very expensive. And so she challenged me to figure out what I can do by myself. I did not know how to produce music. I did not know how to record music. I did not know how to record my voice and give it the echoes and all the different stuff that music requires a vocalist to have. And I didn't know how to shoot videos. So the music I had, I couldn't put out music videos. And the music that I had written, I couldn't record. And I said, I can write. Obviously, I can write, but I don't know how to write. She goes, just write stuff and put it up. So I started writing on Facebook every day, like a blog. But it was just every single day I'd pick a picture. Because I used to save pictures for inspiration. And I'd have cool pictures, fun pictures, cute pictures. One of my favorite was a little monkey feeding a little baby tiger with a baby bottle. And then I would just write about love, or I'd write about regret, or I'd write about hate or anxiety, or write about the dumb things that I did. And I would just share that with my audience. And I was doing it because I just didn't want to get forgotten. I was like, I can't afford to wait 6 months for my next song to come out. Let me just put stuff out there so people don't forget me. And people really connected with the writing because it's more accessible. You don't realize, I'm a lyricist, so I can hear lyrics. I'm not a producer, so I can't hear the intricacies of music. But I realize that more people can connect with a written paragraph than they can with music. And
who do you think you were connecting with at that time? And, did you get a sense of who your, I suppose, audience was?
I think anybody who had an attention span past 3 sentences at that point.
Anyone?
Yeah, just literally, it was all walks of life and just people who read. And slowly I started to realize it because my shows, as I started doing more live shows, slowly more and more, I did a show in Vancouver where 100% of the audience was female and they all had books in their hands and none of them knew I rapped. They all came, they thought it was a book reading. And back then, and that's when I made the book, but pretty much and to go back a little bit, as I wrote on Facebook, the top comments were always about, wow, like I connect with this, or it sounds like you live in my head. And I realized very quickly that we're all in the same boat. I'm talking about my regrets because everybody has regrets because we all have a past.
You say that in your book that what you're saying isn't groundbreaking, that what you're actually saying is things that people already think of, or they already have that wisdom but don't really know it.
Yeah. So in my music, I originally used to talk about issues. I talk about what was happening in Punjab. I talk about what was happening in the Middle East. Talk about what was happening in Somalia, or I'll be talking about what's happening in the States. And then you start to realize that, and I think it was very specifically probably what had to do with in Sri Lanka, with the conflict there, because the conflict ended. And I was like, holy shit, like all these stories and these historical moments that I'm talking about are eventually going to end. And I started thinking about all the artists that I love, the Bob Marleys or the Beatles or anybody. I was like, what makes their stuff timeless? Because they didn't talk about specific events. They went one level deeper and they talked about the human element to it. So then I stopped talking about it was Israel and Palestine. I started talking about power and oppression. Because power and oppression is a story that will exist forever. And then you start to realize, okay, instead of talking about power and oppression and pointing fingers at people, let's talk about the power and oppression within myself. And that's the human condition. And then I started reconnecting me back with Sikhi. Because, you know, happy birthday, Guru Nanak Dev Ji. The essence of all of Sikhi, the real essence, when you get past the turbans and the beards and the karas, is human nature and the human experience. And I started writing about the human experience through my own eyes, and I would just say you instead of me. I just changed all the pronouns. And we realized we're all in the same boat. We all have things we regretted from yesterday. We all have anxiety about what's gonna happen tomorrow. You know, we all have people who don't live up to our expectations. We're all unhappy because of how we handle the things that happen in our life. We all judge things too much and don't spend enough time understanding it. And I started realizing that I had the time to think about this stuff because I can't turn off this brain. And I was taking long walks and trying to figure out what I was trying to do with my own life and figuring out where my responsibility was because I was done blaming other people for where I was. And that sharing those ideas is what connected me with people. And then eventually they started, it was the community. It was folks like you that said, write a book. And I instantly said no because I don't know how to write a book and I don't got no money. And somebody showed me Indiegogo, said you should crowdfund it, you know, raise some money. And be vulnerable and ask for help. And then somebody showed me Adobe InDesign, like this is how you build a book. And somebody invited me over to their place, sat me down for 3 hours and taught me how to build a book. So it took me a year to compile and write Unlearn. It took me a year and a half to build it. So the original version of Unlearn that I released in 2014, I did everything. I picked the fonts, I set the margins, I, you know, made sure chapter 25 was the same size as chapter 37. I did everything by myself. And if anybody has a copy of it, it's got the blue cover. There's still spelling mistakes in it, you know? And it was a big testament to perfect doesn't have to be, you know, perfect isn't a requirement for any of this. And that was in 2014. And then it was independent. And then instead of selling T-shirts and other merch at my shows, I'd sell the book. And I would just pick a city and say, hey, and I did this in 2014. Hey, London, I want to perform in London, but I'm not going to even begin organizing the show until we sell 50 tickets. At least that way I know I have enough money to buy a plane ticket to come over. And also, if you want to sponsor my event, so, you know, Gill Law Firm presents Humble the Poet live in concert, give me 500 pounds. If you want to be the only person who sponsors my event, because I'm going to take everybody's money, give me 1,500 pounds, right? And I'd end up getting more corporate sponsorships for the events than selling tickets. And then I'd have enough money to throw a show before I even had to advertise it. And then I'd just ship a box of books to the city and then sell those as well. And I'd be like, all right, $15 for a ticket, $30 for a ticket and a signed book. And the shows were half the size of this, so I could meet and greet everybody and make it happen. And I slowly, inch by inch, over 3 years, got myself out of debt.
In Unlearn, there's lots of chapters that really stood out for me. I'd love to know which one is your favourite. One that I really liked was chapter, I think, 35, Beliefs. This is a bit, throughout the book you're quite blunt, which I like, quite no nonsense, very Asian parent, which is, I think, the vibe that you're going for. And the one about beliefs is where you say you make a point of saying, people always say, and it's not necessarily about faith, but just generally belief systems we have, that you're not going to f people's beliefs. People say you shouldn't f with my beliefs, but you're like, no, I'm going to do it. Tell me a little bit about, you know, that, why you wrote that chapter.
Well, the thing is, so in Sikh philosophy, we talk a lot about the ego, you know, and they talked about the ego before Freud called it the ego. And it's this idea of your identity and how you identify yourself. And you realize very quickly that people, people don't have ideas, ideas have people. because an idea needs to be formulated. And if you really think about many of the ideas that you're holding in your head, you didn't formulate the idea. Somebody planted that idea in your head. Whether it's Manchester United is the greatest team in what do you call it, football? In football.
Not at the moment, they're not, but...
Or, Donald Trump's or, there's only one true God, or whatever it is. Most of the time, we never sat there and did the work to formulate an idea. It was given to us. That's why so many people have the same exact ideas, because they were injected into us. And we forget that, that we do have a nature, but we definitely were nurtured. And we have habits, and we were socialized for different things. And what we don't realize is now when you attack an idea, people feel like you're attacking them. So if I'm like, Manchester United sucks, it's going to piss somebody off in this room. I don't know, I don't watch soccer, so don't ask me. Also, fun fact, the word soccer originated, you guys know where? In the UK. Stop making me feel bad for saying soccer. Soccer is a short form for ASOC, which is a short form for the Association of Football. So that's where it came from. Don't make me feel bad for saying soccer. Fun fact. But it was this concept and this idea, and I know we talk about reading a chapter. Would you guys like me to read this one?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a
What
skip up.
chapter is
It's
it?
chapter 35.
35. There we go. Let's talk about your beliefs. Is it a long one? Oh, it's not. Okay. And the beautiful thing about this book is every chapter is only 2 pages.
And I wondered, is that because, people like things in bite-sized information, but is that a lot to do with you having taught children? You know what I mean? Being in elementary school?
No,
Sorry,
she's
that's
right. She's absolutely right. At the end of the day, it's not like as I said, the ideas presented in this book aren't revolutionary. They're not things that didn't exist before. If you spend time reading Confucius or reading Rabbani or reading anybody who has any level of self-awareness, you've heard some of these ideas before. The reason I think people are connecting with this book specifically is the languaging that I put it in. I was an elementary school teacher. I learned how to take heavy ideas and package them into digestible nuggets for people to get. Because when you deal with an 8-year-old, you're dealing with 10 minutes of attention span max. And I spent 7 years existing only with 8-year-olds. So my communication style worked for there. And then you realize if you can explain it to an 8-year-old, you can explain it to an adult. You just don't tell them that you're explaining it to an 8-year-old. And it connects with their inner child, if anything. But it was that and a combination of probably, again, a lot of this came from what I was sharing on Facebook. So character limits, whatever they had going on that website back then. But also, I'm not the biggest reader. So my attention span, fizzles away and I'm grabbing my phone and
You were
looking
quite
at
honest
it.
about that before to me, so you don't read much.
I don't read much in the form of books.
Yeah.
Articles on Reddit, do they count?
Yeah.
Yeah. People's captions on Instagram.
No.
I'm lying.
Tweets.
I don't read
I
captions
read
on Instagram.
tweets.
I retweet. I don't know if I read them, but okay. So let's talk about your beliefs chapter. If you guys have a book and want to read a lot, see the teacher in me. See how I'm holding it.
Put your hands up if any questions about it.
Or you read it and then they're like, you didn't show the picture. Like, and every single child has to see the picture before you can turn. I don't miss it. So let's talk about your beliefs. At this point, some of you may be thinking, in my favorite Jim Jeffries voice, don't you fuck with my beliefs, Humble. You wrote a few cute things, but you're about to cross the line. Respect my beliefs. I have every intention to fuck with your beliefs. I don't even know your beliefs. I don't really care what they are. I'm more concerned with the idea of beliefs itself. Beliefs are simply opinions that we don't particularly want to reevaluate. They may pertain to our favorite sports team, political ideologies, spiritual philosophies, or simply the way we govern our lives. People take pride in their beliefs, as if having a particular belief is an accomplishment of some sort. This is an interesting idea because once pride enters the ring, folks then relate their beliefs to their identity. Once people stick the flag of identity into beliefs, they no longer see a distinction between the belief and themselves. There are the type of individuals who get bent when you criticize their beliefs. At this point, I could give specific examples, but that action alone would illustrate my point. The stronger the belief, the more we're dug in, and the less pleasant it is to hear anything that doesn't support that thought. We are bound to facts, but we hold beliefs. Sometimes we can get in so deep with our beliefs that we forget where we end and the beliefs begin. My beliefs in life dramatically changed when I realized this idea. The moment I was able to give someone a scenario to scrutinize my beliefs, I realized I was only open, the moment I realized I wasn't able to give someone a scenario to scrutinize my beliefs, I realized I was only open to folks who were already in my side. It was never about the belief. Many of the beliefs I held were handed down to me. I never owned them to begin with, but I did feel threatened by anyone who didn't share them because I simply began to believe that they were a part of me. I realized how closed-minded I had become and how little I was learning, so I let them go. I embraced I don't know-ism, and everyone I met was now a potential teacher and adventurer. People marry their beliefs and cannot fathom a life where they could believe anything to the contrary, like British people not being so polite.
Well, yeah, we had a conversation about this.
Yeah.
We'll bring that up a bit.
They've closed doors and take it personally when you say anything that doesn't align with their views. I don't blame them. Who doesn't enjoy being agreed with and validated? Strong beliefs can serve as comfort zones, which, although familiar territory, are no more than a graveyard for personal growth. This chapter isn't for everyone. It's for the folks who are open to it. I'm writing this because I know there are individuals who want to divorce and unlearn some of the things that were poured into their minds at a very young age, but are afraid of the world afterwards. Don't be. The wisest ones are the ones who acknowledge how little they know. I would love for you to write down the beliefs you value and ask yourself where they came from. Then ask yourself if you can imagine life divorced from those beliefs. That version of me existed when I started this Humble the Poet journey. I was then blessed with opportunities to travel and meet folks who were caring enough to fuck with my beliefs, until I realized I was just living off hand-me-down ideas, very few which agreed with my unique being. You are not your beliefs. Don't take offense if someone doesn't hold the same beliefs as you, and don't think it's beneficial to impose your beliefs on others. Be wary of the beliefs you hold that you cannot conceive of letting go. We'd all be better off to continually reevaluate our relationship with our beliefs. They may be invisible anchors to an adventure of lifelong learning. This may not be the most popular chapter in the book, and I'm okay with that. I'm grateful that people don't see things the way I do, and it's my opportunity to leave my comfort zone and grow. You are not your belief.
I like that you had a little exercise in there as well.
Yeah.
The teacher, sit down and write your beliefs.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to make it applicable learning. Yeah.
Did you get any pushback at all on that particular chapter? Have you, from people who follow your work?
I mean, I get consistent pushback all the time, so I couldn't, focus specifically on that.
And is that from, because your demographic is it fair to use the term millennials? Generations, oh, look at you, you don't like that, do you?
Possibly.
But
maybe even younger.
Yeah. So that chapter is quite interesting then, because you're really kind of saying, and we were talking before about the whole cancel culture.
Yeah.
What kind of pushback do you get then, and how do you handle it?
Again, I think what happens is when you insult a non-living thing like an idea or a belief, and people get offended, it's that moment where you're like, look, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about something that you might care about. But even then, that's not a real thing. And that's an argument that's used in both ways. But I think what I ended up realizing, and especially now these days, because this was written 5 years ago, is how divisive things are. And that's based off belief. Some people believe, immigrants are the solution. Some people believe immigrants are the problem. And they're not open to having a dialogue with the other side, because each side could probably make a decent argument on some level in any way. And it's about being open to that. And I think for me, I was influenced when I heard this woman speak. Her name is Uzma Khan, and she was like 65. And what she said was, there is no generation gap. There are people who are open to new ideas, and there are people who are not open to new ideas. It doesn't matter what their age is. And I think that was one of the changing points for me too, where I always want to be open to new ideas. And that means continually not being comfortable in the beliefs that I have. When you get pushback, you just allow these people to exist. As I said, the larger your audience gets, the more creative the pushback you receive.
And is that online, on social media?
Yeah, I've never received anything in person ever. In the last 10 years, nobody has ever said anything to my face, ever.
Would you like them to?
Huh? I mean, I'm in the UK. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen here. So, no, I don't.
We were just on the comment that you made about British people being polite.
And hooligans.
And what?
Hooligans.
And some. But we were saying.
Yeah, I feel like the UK is the most passionate demographic of audience I've dealt with.
Really?
Yeah, like people don't show up to my shows because it's something to do. They show up because they want to be there. Yeah, and I feel like everybody's very passionate about whatever they care about here.
We're very polite, and you're Canadian, and you were like, you can see the similarities, but you are quite American, you were saying, in the way.
I'm trying to adopt the assertiveness of Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
It's just, I mean, again, like, you know, the UK and Canada have a very close relationship. We have, you know, your queen on our money, and, you know, so that's enough there. But I think culturally wise, like, we don't have a super strong entrepreneurial spirit. We don't have that go-getter spirit. Whereas in America, they're all cowboys. They're all just go get it, and everybody's one step away from being a self-made millionaire. And for me, I exist half the time in Toronto, half the time in LA. And in LA, it's just a go get it mentality. And you tell people your dreams there, they're either like good luck or how can I help. You tell your people your dreams in Toronto, they just give you 5 reasons what to be scared of. You know, like, but what if like you put a music video up and people leave racist comments on your video, or what type of pushback do you get, or what if, you know, like they bring up all these things, and then that starts to inject itself into your head, and you'd be like, oh, like that's a really good point, or like what if you run out of money, or you know, what if this doesn't work, or what if you piss off the wrong person, or what if you sign the wrong contract. In the States, it's just like, go get it, like let me know when it's ready, you know, and we'll support it and we'll share it. And I think trying to find the best of both worlds. You know, there's things that I don't admire about them, there's things I don't admire about Canada, there's things I love about being Canadian, and there's things that I love that I learned from the Americans. And again, as I said, I'm just trying to be open and take the best and disregard the rest.
You're really inspired by, this comes out in your book, by, you know, lots of American artists. You quote Tupac and 50 Cent, and then there's quotes from Fight Club as well. Tell us about that, like how, I mean, it's all, in all seriousness, like you've got these life lessons that you say that have come from the lyrics of Tupac's music.
Yeah, so in this book, I quote 50 Cent a lot, because 50 Cent wrote a book called The 50th Law. So there's a popular book called The 48 Laws of Power, and that was written by Robert Greene. And then Robert Greene, and in that book, Robert Greene takes some of the most bold humans to ever exist, and he tells their story, whether it's Napoleon, whether it's, I think, Frederick Douglass, and whether it's Machiavelli. He just takes these very bold individuals who made an impact and tries to find a common thread in all of them. And then what he ended up doing was he co-wrote a book with 50 Cent called The 50th Law. And pretty much saying he equated 50 Cent to these guys, because 50 Cent, if you guys know his story, he's a very bold individual. He pretty much was a street gangster, got shot 9 times, and then, you know, got into the music game, and now he's, you know, worth 8 figures, and he's conquering the entertainment world in his own different way. And in that, the entire 50th Law had to do with fear. So 50 Cent had a lot of really interesting quotes to do with fear, because for him, you know, he connected his street life of selling drugs to the corporate world. And he's just like, the only difference is in the corporate world, they won't kill me. So the moment he realized that he couldn't die in the corporate world, he excelled, and he got even more bold. And so he had a quote, he said, you know, pray or worry, don't do both. And I thought that was really interesting, because I was praying and worrying at that time. And, you know, the same thing with Tupac. These guys drop gems and pieces of wisdom, and they use everyday language for you to kind of figure that out. And for me, as a hip-hop artist, you know, I consume so much hip-hop. That's where a majority of my life lessons come from. And like recently, Jay-Z's 444 album, you know, saying you can't heal what you don't reveal. You know, that should be probably like the best advertisement for therapy. Or, you know, a loss ain't a loss, it's a lesson. And I think that's an important one too. So they put him up so poetically, and that stuff sticks with you. You know, I think Nas recently, you know, he said, you know, you'll never get the answers if you never take any chances. Like, and it's just, you know, they simplify it. And I think that's what I've been trying to do as well, is just take these really important ideas and simplify them so they get stuck in our heads.
One thing I wanted to ask you, I know at the start we sort of joked about the whole social media sensation and influencer. You know, there are lots of people out there, aren't there, on social media, on Instagram, giving these sorts of nuggets of wisdom. You know, you sort of scroll on your feed and they're there, aren't they? What do you think makes you stand out?
I think I don't promise a happily ever after. I think that's the big one. I don't promise people happiness. You know, if you read Unlearn, I critique happiness, if anything. I say, instead of trying to be happy, realize that being happy isn't as valuable as you think. You know, we don't learn when we're happy. You know, we only learn when we're quite the opposite. And happiness has a lot to do with our expectations. So I think for me, because I would read a lot of those when I was at my lowest. And when I was at my lowest, I needed to pay my bills. I didn't need to feel good about myself and get a pat on the back and fix my insecurities. I needed to pay bills, and I needed pragmatic ways to get my energy back up so I can figure this out. So I think for me, it was about finding the value in where I was. And where I was a place of failure, a place of insecurity, a place of trust issues, and trying to figure out, well, how can I use this towards my benefit? And for example, with trust issues, you know, realizing that, A, I don't want to be that guy who says, I got trust issues, I can't trust the next person that walks in this room. So I switched it and said, well, who can I trust? I can trust myself, which means I can be prepared for whoever comes my way, and I will embrace them with open arms. And if they screw me over, I will trust myself to be able to handle it. I won't be naive going in. I will have my guard up to a certain level, but I won't have my guard up to a level where I'm closed off to people. Same thing with insecurities. I started realizing, well, why am I feeling insecure? Well, I'm broke, so I associated my self-worth with my money. Well, that's not a healthy thing to do. What should I associate my self-worth with? So I decided, well, what are things that are of value to me that nobody can ever take away? My ability to love. Nobody can take that out of my wallet. So let me build a new foundation off of that. And if I do stop loving, it's because I forfeited it. My ability to tell the truth. Nobody can take that away from me. And if I choose to stop telling the truth, it's because I gave it up. And building a new foundation that I can find solid ground on. And I think what I was doing was, as I was figuring this stuff out, I was sharing it in the book. And I think people found it a lot more pragmatic versus,
What you're seeing at the moment.
again, like,
You don't have to
God
name
doesn't close the door without opening a window. And you're just like, I don't even know what that means.
I was going to say, you don't have to name anyone on social media.
Oh, no, I don't
but
think
is
there's
it-
anybody. I
Yeah,
feel like
it's-
that was a generation. I don't think those people exist as much anymore.
I mean, sometimes when you do go on like when I'm scrolling through, you do get those people
I don't
that...
see those people.
Oh, do you know, well, you don't follow them then, do
I
you?
probably
I'm clearly
don't follow
following
them.
them. But you do get people who sort of give you these, like, kind of quotes, don't you? And it's
I always
a
look
bit
at that as
eye-rolling.
It is eye-rolling, but it's probably entry level. It's anybody who is getting introduced to the world of personal growth. It might start with some of the corny quotes.
Yeah.
And then, you know, after that, it can evolve.
You don't do corny quotes, I have to say.
I don't do corny quotes. I don't do corny. I can't. That's not in my...
I'm just checking what time it is. I think people want to ask questions, don't they? I've talked to you for too long. Have we got a mic? Yep, yep. Who'd like to ask questions to Humble? We've got a lady here in the front. Oh, yeah. Okay, we'll come to you after. Go on.
Hiya, thank you very much. You've been like inspirational. Like it's really nice to be in your presence because I've read your books and I love them. But we all have down moments, and you've been on this journey. And I just want to know, like, sometimes it's easier giving other people advice, and it's really hard for you to take your own advice.
I don't read my books yet.
You don't follow your own advice.
I've also been told by friends, don't humble the poet me.
Yeah. But I want to know, what's your motivation? Like, what keeps your spirits uplifted when you're having down moments? Like, what keeps you going?
I think when I have down moments, I view them as injuries, and I think injuries all require time. In the book, I talk about the idea of, like, if you break your leg, you know, there's absolutely nothing you can do to speed up the healing. And there's absolutely an endless list of things you can do to slow it down. And I think that's kind of where we're at. So I think for me, when I'm having a down moment, the main thing I do is I give myself time. And then I also just kind of have a little mental checklist of things that could probably help. Like question number 1, are you hungry?
Good question.
Right? Should we just shove a piece of bread in your mouth and see if that changes your mood? And Lily can attest to the many apologies that she receives where I say, I'm sorry, I was just hungry. I didn't mean what I said. Just paying attention to my environment. I think I'm very cognizant of the things that kind of bring me down. So social media is a huge one. You go on social media and you're looking at everybody's highlight reels and it's going to make you compare yourself to them. You're going to feel like crap all the time. You don't go on social media and say people less fortunate than you and be like, wow, I'm so grateful I'm in such a better situation. It's not. You know what I mean? Like, I can literally have published a book 2 weeks ago, and now I got to sit down in the lab, start writing a book, and then somebody else releases a book, and I was like, what am I doing with my life, right? And I think, and that's common for a lot of people. So I think recognizing, again, that's one of the things that will make the healing slow down. So I pay attention to my environment, what I can do, and then I try to have much more visceral, real experiences. I think that helps me a lot too. There's a story in there where I meet Roberta Bondar, who's an astronaut, and she just kind of explained this idea of like, when we eventually get to travel to Mars, there's going to be a point on the trip where you won't be able to see Earth or Mars. You're going to be in the middle of nowhere. And that perspective of like, this isn't a big deal. Like, I'm going to be here, if I'm lucky, for another 70 years, and that's it. Like, it's done. Like, stop taking this shit so serious. And I think that's a liberating, death for me is a very liberating thought, and it reminds me not to take things so seriously. So I think a lot of our emotional challenges are luxuries, because most people in the world are just trying not to die. And so that helps me a lot. And when I'm very, very, very low, a big thing that's helped me now is being of value to other people. So recently I was having a really bad day, and it was just like coming from every angle. I opened up an email. Somebody had reached out to me to be a mentor. I called them up, and I'm like, all right, I'll do it. Let's set a schedule, and just put my energy into them, you know? So I think that's probably the best thing to do. Like, when the Raptors lost Game 5, and I paid a boatload of money for my ticket, and we lost by 1 point, I went outside, and the first thing I did was give a homeless person $20, and do something like that. If you're gonna be miserable, then at least do something nice for somebody else.
Good advice.
And we all have that power anytime.
Should bring the mic here.
Hey, I just had a quick question about, so you've just said that Lily was the one who was one of the people who encouraged you to write, and even now on social media we see you guys hyping each other up all the time. How important do you think it is to have such people who are essentially your cheerleaders in life to be successful or to do well? How important do you think they play a role?
It's a really good question. I, for the longest time, was doing it by myself, and I also had my guard up. I thought, like, Humble the Poet, the name came from the fact that I didn't want people to know who I was. I was putting out just audio music, and I was like, if people find out who I am, they're gonna, you know, the insults that were already in my head, or the insults that people had said to me, like, you can't rap, you're not black, you can't do this, you can't do that, and thinking that, you know, I need to protect myself from this, so I'll hide behind this name. And developing, you know, a normalcy with that. And then my sister, I remember she found out I did this, and she's like, oh my God, my brother's like Edgar Allan Poe. And just feeling my heart melt and being like, I trained myself not to need your approval, but I just got your approval and I'm just melting. And the first time my father came up to me, he's like, hey, I need you to write about this story. And be like, you're interested in what I do? Like, it feels really good. So I think you realize people assume, and I mean, I actually saw this at an award show that when Drake got an award, Drake said, people think because I'm so big that they don't have to say congratulations anymore. And he goes, but it still matters to me that people I care about care what I'm doing. So you can't depend on it. It's the cherry on top. Our relationship is because we started together, and we were the only two people in our city doing it, and we were both coming from places. I had just come from this with somebody I considered a brother who had lied and broke my heart. Somebody that she really cared about had lied and broke her heart. We were both nice people who wanted to trust and be nice to people, but we didn't want to get used again. And I think when we found each other, that's what that was. But at the same time, you know, it's learning and growing from each other and having that relationship. But I also know that I can't lean always on her for everything. I can't, I can't make my marketing campaign, well, Lily will post about it and share it with the world, and that's how people are going to find. I can't make that. I'm paving my own path. And most of the things, the most wonderful things she's ever done for me are things that no one will ever see on social media. And I think that's probably the thing I'm most proud of, is if you follow us deeply, you'll realize we're not very nice to each other on social media. We're very nice to each other in person. Sometimes I'll say mean things to her on Twitter, and I'll be sitting beside her. And so I think that's probably, and I take a lot of pride in that, because in LA, everybody pretends to be friends on social media, and they're not. So we have the opposite. I'm always, if you guys read the comments I leave under pictures, I'm always saying mean things, and it's because we're actual real friends. But it's nice to have, but again, you can't depend on other people. You just can't. You have to be self-sufficient. You have to be, and then it's a bonus to have people. And I think it was Khalil Gibran that said, you know, when two people care about each other, and he was probably talking about romantic, but I think it involves for every relationship. When two people care about each other, the further they are from each other, the more they can hold up, you know, because they're pillars, and they have more space and more wind can flow between them. So I think, you know, and in this book I say, you know, love can be a death trap for dependencies. So it's important, but not essential. And the best way to receive that type of support is to give that type of support. And you give that type of support because you have it to give, not because you want it. You know, there's another chapter in this book again. Love is the gift. Love is the gift, not a loan. You know, you don't give out love expecting it to come back. You give it out because you have it to give. So she supports me because she's looking for people to support, and I support her because, and now it's just, the dynamic's gotten very interesting where the type of help that I'm able to provide her has nothing to do with, you know, she doesn't, I don't do anything for Superwoman or the business anymore. It's more of a friendship thing now. And vice versa. The most important things she does for me are personal. There's nothing to do with our work anymore.
Any more questions? Yeah.
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you. It wasn't actually a question, but I think for us millennials, and you know your favorite word, it's really hard to expose yourself in today's world and just be yourself. And I think looking at you and Lily and stuff, I've exposed myself a lot. I lost my mum last year. I've got my own poetry page, but I'm doing loads of fun stuff, and it's scary, but then I see other people doing it, and it's really needed, and it's really cool. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for what you do.
Well, no, I appreciate that. And I mean, can I ask you a question? Why do you think it's hard to be yourself?
I think like culture, pressure from parents, culture, restrictions. You're always told to be a doctor, engineer, or a lawyer, and if you're not that, you're just basically a failure. And I went into med school for 2 years, and now I'm going into business management. And I want to launch something in memory of my mum. So I'm the black sheep of the family. So yeah, it's cultural expectations and society and judgment, but really now I've realized it doesn't actually matter. Like death could happen tomorrow, so you just got to be yourself. Do what you enjoy.
I completely agree, and I think, you know, like props to you for figuring that out earlier than later. I think most people figure it out, but some of them figure it out way too late, and they're not in a position to kind of turn things around. But I think also, if you look at it, especially from a Desi or South Asian perspective, it had to start somewhere. So we're starting it now. And what was challenging for you with your relationship with your parents, because it's not like they're intentionally trying to make you miserable. They know what they know, and they know doctor, lawyer, engineer. That's what they know as the goal. You'll know different, you know? And I think having compassion for what they're doing, seeing the gaps, and just continuing it forward. And I know for me, things changed when I stopped worrying about my parents and I started worrying about my nieces and nephews. And it wasn't about what they needed to hear, it was about what they needed to hear. And that emboldened me and gave me a lot more power, because they needed to, and with a couple of my friends too, it's the same thing. It's like, stop worrying about what your mom's gonna say, think about what your niece needs to see. What she needs to see you saying, wearing, speaking, acting. What example she needs. And she needs to see power. She doesn't need to see somebody who's, you know, living for other people all the time. So I think we're making progress, and we're making baby steps, and it might not be easy, but I don't think it's supposed to be easy. It wouldn't be worth it otherwise.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
We've got time for a couple more. Yeah.
Let's not forget the corner here as well. I see you.
Because you can be my eyes over here.
Yeah, they're not the not so well lit corners. I'm assuming is where the troublemakers are.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask, considering how far you've come in your journey, what are you most proud of?
I am, for those who couldn't hear, he said, what am I most proud of? I am most proud of the unique opportunities I was able to create for other people. and you guys can all relate to this. Anything you do for the first time is super exciting, and then you do it for the 12th time and it's regular. That's the same for a red carpet, or that's the same for traveling to an exotic destination. That's the same for many things. And I realized that, you know, sometimes when I'm in Toronto, you know, I'm on everybody's mailing list to get invited to every single event. But if I take one of my friends as a +1, they've never done a red carpet. They've never got a swag bag. They've never got all these really cool things that kind of come with the adventure. So for me, it's the things I've been able to do for people that I care about. And I really want to stress, do things for people you care about. Like, start with the people you like. And I was able to get my parents to meet the Minder. They were big fans of the Minder. And I got to get them to meet him, and they got to sit down in a hotel with him and just chat until they got overwhelmed and said, we have to go. You know? So like, for me, that was a big deal.
It's amazing.
Me meeting him wasn't a big deal. Me meeting most people at this point is no longer a big deal, because for me it's work, and I can't afford to fangirl over anybody, because then in the future that'll close me off to potentially working with them. Just recently, this summer, I got my sister. My sister, since day one, has said, I want to meet Sean Paul, I want to meet Sean Paul. And I just got to make that happen in the summer, where she got to see him in concert, right in the front of the stage, and then she also got to meet him, take pictures and hug him and chat with him. And it felt good knowing that I can create this, because like, for her, that was the only thing she ever wanted to do. And so now there's a little thing in my family where everybody has a list of who they want to meet.
A long list.
And everybody gets one. Everybody gets one, and it's been cool. And I've been able to, even sometimes if I can't get them to meet, I get them to send videos. You know, I got to, one of my friends, Sandy, she is big in styling, and she writes articles about different fashion icons, and she wrote a big one about Pharrell. I was able to give him the article, get him to read the article, get him to send her a video explaining how he felt after reading it, you know. Stuff, and she was like, I almost crashed my car when I saw the video. So that stuff means more than anything I'll ever be able to selfishly do for myself, and I think that's probably what it is. It's kind of like, a long time ago, all of this seemed impossible. Now I want to show them. I already know nothing's impossible now. I want to show them, like, these things were beyond your wildest dreams, let's do it. I got to take two of my friends to Skywalker Ranch, which is George Lucas's, where he made Star Wars. I had to take them there, and they're film nerds, and they were kids in candy stores. It's the same thing. So for me, doing for other people it always makes me smile when I think about it, and it's been good. And I have a lot of amazing, amazing friends that I made on this journey. A lot of couches I slept on, and even now sometimes I'm still sleeping on those couches because it's more fun than a hotel. And I get opportunities to pay these people back for believing in me when I had nothing to show for my work.
Okay, thanks.
Just take one quick question
Over
from the
there.
lady over here. And then Humble will be, you're staying on, aren't you, for a bit to sign?
Yes, I am. You're copying me.
Thank you. It's been wonderful sharing from your heart. I'm going to throw a little bit of a firecracker into the works. Jallianwala Bagh. This year is the centenary of the British massacre of Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar, as I'm sure you'll be aware, and as I'm sure many people in this room won't be, when the British Army fired on, murdered, massacred hundreds of unarmed civilian men, women and children, many of them who were Sikh pilgrims in your own country. The head of the Church of England, Justin Welby, has recently visited Jallianwala Bagh, as you may be aware, and he prostrated himself on the ground and expressed a very sincere apology. We still haven't had an apology 100 years on from the British government, and I wonder, is this something that you have rapped on? And forgive me, I know nothing at all about rapping. Is it something you've rapped on? I have a particular reason for feeling this needs to be brought up. As you probably are aware, this country is very divided, and there's rampant xenophobia, and many people of colour feel physically unsafe and unwelcome. And I've discussed Jallianwala Bagh with the previous head of the Church of England, Rowan Williams, and he agrees with me. Britain must apologise, and we must start teaching uncomfortable truths in the schools so that people have an intelligent understanding of the past, so that the attitudes of white British people alter in an appropriate way towards foreigners. And I just wonder, what are your thoughts on this, and have you rapped on this subject?
Great question. So she mentioned Jallianwala Bagh, which, for those who don't have context, imagine a courtyard maybe three times the size of this room with one entrance and one exit. And it was probably full of maybe a couple of hundred people doing a pilgrimage. There was thousands, okay. And there was only one exit, one entrance, and that entrance was being blocked by British soldiers with weapons, and they killed everybody. They just shot and started killing everybody. And for me, I learned about the story as a kid, and then recently I went there, and the first thing that you notice is a well, and what people were doing was jumping into the well and dying that way. And it's just the most heartbreaking thing you can ever imagine. And the question was, have I ever rapped about it? Because you're speaking about whether there's been official acknowledgement or apologies.
This centenary year.
Yeah, so this is going to be the 100-year anniversary of that happening. So I made a song called Sing With Me, in play on words, S-I-N-G-H, Sing With Me. And, you know, because the thing is, the common narrative in the history of people in Sikh philosophy is we're minorities everywhere. You know, we represent 2 to 3% of the population in India. And the moment we tried to raise a voice there, you know, we had challenges. And, you know, Harmandir Sahib, which is right by Jallianwala Bagh, has been destroyed on 3 separate occasions, which one of the most intense occasions, and one of the least known ones, destroyed almost 25% of our entire population. And instead, and this is a big thing, and kind of going back to the book of self-pity and victimization, the common story when you think about it is like, holy crap, we repeatedly get attacked and massacred and murdered, but then it's also, holy crap, we keep coming back. We keep growing from it. And what happened recently, in addition to those events, is 1984. And that was the time where many of our parents left. And they looked at it like, this ain't home anymore. We're clearly not welcome. And they came to other sides. And then my generation, in the safety and security of the Western world, started doing our research and speaking up against it. Realizing that our parents were still kind of like, you know, my mom has cousins who went missing at the hands of the police and have never turned up ever again. And it was real. It wasn't something that they had academic debates over. This was some real things for them. So what I realized was, in Canada, we have the Komagata Maru, which happened in 1908, where they kept a boatload of folks from India a kilometer offshore, and they made them stay there for a couple of months. And it's considered one of I think the second most racist thing ever outside of the Japanese internment camps. And it also took 100 years for an official apology. And I dug deep into that, and it's very similar to kind of the Alan Turing. It took almost 50 years before there was acknowledgement for, you know, the British government arresting Alan Turing and leading to his eventual suicide. I don't know if the collective healing comes in the form of apologies. I kind of personally, and this may be an unpopular idea, I kind of view that as a little bit of our old Stockholm Syndrome needing validation. You know, they apologize to us, now we can heal. Like, no, we're healing. We've been healing. We're a very resilient people. And we understand why oppressive people don't acknowledge their evils. You know, I walk around the beauty of the city and like, wow, this place is really pretty. You know, and you're like, well, where'd they get the money to pay for all this? You know, I think Harvard did was it Harvard or Princeton did the study? I think they equated it to about $174 trillion if Britain had to pay India back for what they stole. India look a lot different with $174 trillion. So for me, it's you know, stop waiting for the apology. I have it written somewhere. Stop waiting for the apology you never got. And I think when I think about the 100th year of that, it's going to be to celebrate the resilience of our people and no longer wait for somebody who was not a part of that now to be told to feel guilty for it. And realizing that, again, it has to do with power. That one of the pros and cons of the Sikh population is we've never been the majority. And there's a lot of history of a lot of groups of people who were the oppressed minority. And then when they came into a power, they became the oppressive majority. And I feel like we've been dodging a bullet, and I don't have as much faith in my people that they'd be doing any better, especially when you think on a local village level, some of the discrimination that's been happening. So for me, Sing With Me was my celebration of our resilience. And it's, us being that rose that grows from the ashes, and saying that we don't need, many populations have been treated horribly and they're not getting their reparations, they're not getting their acknowledgements. And at this point now, if we can exist without it, let's continue to thrive with it. And if it comes, it comes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's the same way in my own personal life, people that have hurt me, they've been forgiven without the apology, but they're just forgiven and told to stay over there. And I think that's kind of what it is. History doesn't repeat. What was it Mark Twain said? History doesn't repeat, but it definitely rhymes. And I think, we should look at that history when we start to think about the problems that we have today. And it is really, especially with xenophobia, especially the xenophobia in Canada. There's a lot of controversy right now when a big sportscaster got mad because people weren't wearing poppies, and he referred to them as you people. And it started the big debate about whether we need to honor our veterans. And, people started posting pictures of Sikhs who fought in World War I and World War II. And somebody posted, said, stop, I think it was a Sikh historical page on Instagram, said, stop sending me these pictures of these soldiers who fought one of the most useless wars ever. He goes, everybody killed innocent people that time. And this isn't something we're celebrating and acknowledging just because people are arguing over a poppy. And I think what we need to do is, as an artist, my job is to take pain and create something beautiful from it. And one of the most inspiring examples that I've seen is the 9/11 Memorial in New York, one of the most beautiful buildings, the Oculus, you'll ever see. They took pain and they made something beautiful from it. I'd rather take something beautiful in celebration of the 100 years of that event, as well as 84, as well as what happened in the 17th century, as well as what's probably continued to happen, because now they realize that they couldn't kill us with bullets, but they can definitely take away our language, our identity, our history, and that's a playbook that's been used on the Aboriginals in North America. That's a playbook that's being used on the Black community in North America. That's a playbook that's being used with people out here. And it's just like, all right, let's take the Hindu-speaking people and teach them English. Let's take the Punjabi-speaking people and teach them Hindi. Let's just get them all confused. And then we don't have to fight them anymore. And I think what we have to do is celebrate our resiliency, celebrate our identity, celebrate our unity, and realize that, whoever committed those atrocities, they're not here anymore. And if we're going to hold their great-great-grandkids accountable, then let's not be surprised when we continue to have these divisiveness. And there was a gentleman, I believe his name is Ramandeep Singh, and what happened was he's a university professor at Columbia in New York, and I'm messing up the dates and I'm messing up the names, and I probably messed up the university, but my point is still valid. He was sitting at a park in the evening in Harlem, and he was attacked by a group of teenagers in what was considered a hate crime. The teenagers were caught, and they were charged with hate crime, because I think they called him a terrorist, and they said, get your Muslim ass out of here. And when they asked him to reply, he said, I only feel gratitude. I feel grateful that my child and my wife weren't there to witness it or be a part of the attack. I'm grateful that they didn't kill me. I'm grateful that, the consequences that they're going to face will involve education. And I'm grateful that this is starting a national conversation. And that's all he wanted to focus on. There wasn't any focus on his self-victimization. And I feel like if there's one thing with many people, but specifically with the Sikh people, because I can connect with them on a personal level, is we have that resiliency. And if we spend more time celebrating that, then maybe we'll do some self-healing, and we may not need that apology that we're never going to get until somebody needs to win some votes. Y'all asking serious questions. I'm here to sell a book.
I was going to say, is your next book going to be politics? Maybe?
No, my next book is actually going to be about love.
There you go.
Yeah, the next book's going to be about love, because I suck at it. I'm gonna write about the journey, about figuring it out, and hopefully, if I learn something, other people can learn from that.
It's been so great talking to you. We've run out of time.
Okay.
We could have probably stayed here all night, couldn't we? But you've got to go. You've got to sign stuff. So thank
I
you.
want to sign books, and
Thank you,
it's a
everybody.
school night.
Thank you everybody for coming here. But yeah, he's still here. So if you want to ask more questions,
I'm just going right over there. Yeah.
and sign stuff. Thank you.